Welcome to another episode of the Holy Shift Podcast. Episode
All
4,
right,
boys.
we're doing it.
We're actually doing it. We talked about it for so long, and now here we are.
It's exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fun.
It's been a lot of
Feels
It's been
good.
fun.
fun having the conversations, and it's also fun hearing from people who have been listening, even if it is
Absolutely.
only through secret text messages or Facebook messages. A lot of people out there
Yeah, we
thinking
really
the
appreciate
same, and
everybody. Absolutely. We appreciate everybody reaching out, everybody that's listened, everybody that's shared on social media. It's been a lot of fun.
yeah, we like to have other people part of the conversation because we're not experts, we're not scholars, we're just talking, and we like to hear what our listeners have to say too, because it's the only reason we're really doing this. So let's get started. Y'all ready?
Yeah, let's
Episode
do it.
4. What's the topic for the day?
Talking about spiritual authority. These authority figures in our lives who want to, most of the time with good intentions, direct us down the right path. So we want to talk about that responsibility today. So we can just jump right in. What has been you guys' experience with spiritual authority or authority figures,
Hmm.
meaning like pastors
So
or
I would,
like?
yeah. So I would say growing up in youth group, I probably let the pendulum swing a little too far, gave a little too much, uh, allowed a little too much influence. And I think that's because of a few different reasons. Number one, I was just not a very confident person. I had trouble making decisions. So if someone told me what to do, it was a whole lot easier. Someone that obviously respected and trusted. And then two, if you want to get super psychological, uh, probably just having a man figure in my life, parents being divorced. Me and my dad had a good relationship, but I was never called him up to ask for advice or anything like that. So there was that void to be filled. And so I don't think, and again, like you said, I think it's the majority of the time. It's been my experience that it's always with good intentions, I would say. And though I think that maybe I missed some opportunities because I allowed so much influence, ultimately it's led me to where I am now and I really enjoy my life. So,
It's great.
in that regard.
Yeah. I guess for me, like, yeah, we all had the same experience growing up. Well, not the same experience, but we grew up in the same church. And growing up, I didn't really think about it any. I mean, we just went to church and heard the youth pastor, the pastor preach, and we were kids. We probably didn't apply much of that to our lives. But I didn't really
Yeah.
think about it much until when I got older. I was probably 21. I think I was 21 when I started going to a church in Lynn Haven, Lynn Haven, Florida, and Pentecostal church. I mean, I loved the people. I love the pastor. He's a great guy. I don't have anything negative to say about any of those people. But it was very strange to me. It, I remember one night after a Sunday night service, a guy was telling me uh, he was wanting to start a Bible study or do something, and he talked about getting the pastor's permission. And to me, I had never heard of anybody ask for permission from their pastor for anything like that. So that was kind of weird. And he showed me this verse in Hebrews 13:17. I can actually read it because I got it written down. And he showed this to me. It says, "Obey them that have the rule over you and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give account." So he explained to me that this was talking about our pastors. And this was the first time I really had ever heard of giving somebody so much authority over your life. I mean, that verse says to obey them. And this guy's asking if he can have a Bible study. And he's trying to get he's trying to get the pastor's permission. So that was the first time I really came across any kind of like authority of that nature. Like growing up, in the church that we did, everybody was called brother, brother this, brother that.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't really, I mean, even though that we had pastors and stuff, you didn't think of them like as like lording it over you or anything like that. And then at this church,
Absolutely, yeah.
at this church, there was a lot more of uh, a looking at the pastor as almost someone who's kind of next level. Like people would ask this guy for some wild advice. I remember one guy in the church, he had just got married, I think, and he had asked, he was telling us that he had asked the pastor if he could move to Southport, which is like a little town like 10 minutes north. He asked him if he could move or something along those lines, and the pastor told him he didn't think it was a good idea, so the guy didn't move. And there's like some housing opportunities or something. So people would ask for some wild advice, and I bought into this. Is what the point I'm trying to
Yeah.
get to. And I remember whenever I was going to move back home to Bonifay, I actually went and sat down with him and asked asked his advice, asked what church he thought I should attend, all these things. And he didn't want me to attend the church I was planning on going to. And I kind of wrestled with that, but I eventually just kind of tossed that advice aside and did what I wanted to do. But it was just it was a bizarre environment. It was a lot of authority, a lot of expectations, to follow authority. So that was my first real experience with it. I was in my early 20s and was probably under that for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I don't really have any like specific times like TJ did where he can actually remember.
Because no one's ever rolled over your life.
You've always been a free
But
spirit.
yeah, but I do feel like we would put youth leaders and pastors and stuff on a higher pedestal, and we looked at them differently. But I mean, I think they're good for, going to for advice, counseling, stuff like that. But like Josh said too, we let the pendulum swing just a little too much and, treated them higher than what they really are, because they're no better than us. Or, I mean, we're all the same. I mean, God is higher than anybody. But as far as putting pastors on a whole nother level like that, I don't agree with that.
Disagree, huh? And I guess another thing is like, because growing up, we always wanted to follow the Bible. We believed the Bible was God speaking to us, but the Bible was such a dense book. Like, we're told that it's like instructions for life. The Bible is your guidebook. If you ever have questions, open that thing up and it'll direct your path. But it's so dense and it's so long, and it's not a guidebook. It's letters and histories and genealogies and stories and metaphors and prophecies. It's all these things. You're not just going to open it up and find like solid life advice unless you go to like Proverbs or something. That's why everybody loves Proverbs. But so we depend on these pastors and teachers and all the people who we look to in church to basically interpret it for us. Because a lot of people don't care to read the Bible. I think Joe Allen, you said you're not a big Bible reader.
I'm not a big reader in general, not just the Bible. So I'm not trying to knock on the Bible, but
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I mean, I hate to say it, but like stories from that like old or that long time ago, it don't interest me. Maybe
Right.
if I looked into it a little bit more,
Understandably.
it would. But
how many cubits, and then the color of
Yeah,
garments, and
nobody wants to
everything.
read Leviticus or,
The book that
or
single-handedly
Numbers.
keeps people from reading through the Bible.
Yeah, everybody gets the, you know, book number 3 and they're done. So, and it's not exciting. So we look to authority figures to take on that responsibility for us, interpret it, and then teach us what it's saying, you know. So, I mean, I guess that would
And
be
I think too,
most people's experience.
yeah, I think too, I don't know, maybe this isn't too off topic, but like nobody is, or I guess few people would be like a catch-all. Like there are some pastors that are great communicators, like can get up and deliver an amazing sermon, but probably the last person you want to go to for advice on how to handle certain situations. And then the flip side too, like there's pastors that I'm sure struggle in the pulpit, but then like they're very wise and know how to navigate things because of their life experience or whatever. And then you throw on like I don't know if it's, and I'm sure it's a spectrum, but you have the understanding of the amount of influence that you have. Like, do they understand that? Are they taking advantage of that? Is that what like feeds them? Is like because they feel needed, or do they genuinely care about the other person? Like, there's
They
just
feel
so
like
many
they're in charge.
things. Yeah.
So, I guess this is kind of a question for Josh. Like, you were in a pastoral role for a few years.
Hmm.
When you took on that authority role, did your views on that change? Your views on holding that authority change?
Um, I don't know if they changed because I wanted that for so long. Like I wanted to be my pastor. Like I remember, the relationship that we had. Like we would sit in the church van until midnight. I'd tell him my problems. He'd give me advice. Like I wanted that kind of relationship with. I wanted to be able to pour into someone. I think looking back now, knowing going through therapy and knowing more about myself, have a little bit of a hero complex. So I would, feel good if I directed someone in a good direction or whatever. Like it was like I could take credit for it or whatever. But I think, I mean, I did have a big like old crap moment. I remember first, ministry position as youth pastor, 80 plus kids in our youth group, and it's like, oh crap, like I'm spiritually responsible for these kids. Like they're looking to me to, because we had a big bus ministry, so it's like they're not going to be getting, the majority of these kids aren't going to be getting this at home. So it's like I'm their source, and I mean, I felt
Yeah.
that. I felt that weight a lot.
Yeah, and it's a lot of responsibility. I mean, I don't have as much experience at it as you, but I mean, I remember being in those roles as youth pastor or teaching Sunday school, even preaching on Sunday nights or whatever, and thinking this is a major responsibility. But at the same time, in those positions, you get to interact with other people in those positions. And to me, the veil was kind of pulled back. Like, okay, you know, these guys, when you're in a youth group and looking up to these pastors, you think they're like on another level. But then whenever you're a, you know, peer, you're like, okay, these guys are not, they're not any different than me. Even the
Yeah, I might have
top
misunderstood your
dogs.
question in that regard. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I would agree with that.
So, like Joe Allen said, we're all. I mean, you realize we're all the same. Like, and you realize that
Yeah.
I realized, as someone who, at that point, had taken a lot of interest in reading the Bible and studying theology and digging deep and asking questions, I realized these guys don't have all the answers like I thought they did.
Hmm.
So, So realizing that, and then on that note, do you think it's right to ever question those in authority, especially spiritual authority like pastors or such?
I mean, I guess I would say context is key. I mean, as a pastor, they're the leader of an organization, so organizationally, like I think you should respect their authority, like in the flow of the organization, like how that's ran. But if you're talking about like control over your life, should you, when they say jump, you say how high. I think that, I mean, just like anything, I think boundaries are healthy. Well, there's a lot of pastors that have a lot of wisdom. The church that I'm at now, it's multi-campus. And when I was on staff, we would go out and have lunches, all the campuses together. And the senior pastor, I just said, how did you get so wise? He's like, I've had a lot of train wrecks. So it's like he can pull from that life experience. So in that regard, like I think it would be healthy to bounce ideas off of, but I think that's just one voice. I don't think that should be the end all be all because they hold the role of pastor. You attend their church. That is not whatever they say. I want to move to Southport. They say no, so I don't do that. I don't think that's healthy.
What do you think, John?
Um, I mean, as far as questioning them, yeah, I mean, I think we should question everybody, everything. I mean, if they're preaching on something, you know, whether we disagree or agree, you don't want to just, you know, take their word for it. Do a little more research
Mm-hmm.
on your own. I mean, because them being up there in front of the congregation, it the people, they will take it and run with it. And
Absolutely.
I mean, with them being up there, I mean, it's like we said earlier, they're on a high pedestal, and which majority of the people in that congregation is that it's the preacher's way or no way. They'll
Yeah.
stand by it. Um,
Oh yeah.
so I mean, yeah, I mean, as far as questioning
Yeah,
them, yes,
yeah.
And
I think
and
I agree with like what you said. Is that you should question everything. Like I think we all should have a filter. Like when we're fed information, it's ran through a filter. Like, does this make sense? How does this compare against my actual life experience? Does this person have any, you know, does this person care about me? Can I trust this person? Like all those things, you should have a filter that any information that's poured into you is
yeah,
processed through.
yeah, I agree with that. And I think because I have learned that I think critical thinking is very important because
Hmm.
I mean, let's be honest, some ideas are wrong, some ideas are
Hmm.
bad. Like that's just the reality. And people don't agree, especially so like I said, you don't have to be disrespectful to
Hmm.
question an authority. You can do it in a respectful way. But just because they're an authority, I don't think you have to take what they say and run with it. I think it's healthy to ask questions, especially if something doesn't sound right. Because I think even like a lot of people who are messaging us on this about this podcast, they feel comfortable talking to us now because of what they've heard us talk about. But it's kind of like when you go to church on Sunday. It's like that story, when we're kids, the emperor's new clothes, and they parade him around. They make him think that he's got on these clothes that only the wisest and smartest people can see, and everybody can see he's naked, but nobody wants to be left out. Nobody wants to be excluded.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of times on Sunday morning, it's like that for people. They think, this doesn't. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if I agree with that, but everybody else seems to, and I don't want to stand out. So I think I think that's relatable there. Um, but yeah, so I think questioning is healthy for a lot of reasons. Like I said, because there are bad ideas that are preached from pulpits, and on any given Sunday morning, the millions of pulpits across the country are hearing conflicting information. So which one's right? Like we've talked about, a Baptist church could preach a different message. You got a spiritual authority there, then you got a spiritual authority in a Pentecostal church preaching a message, spiritual authority
Yeah,
in a Methodist.
and
So
and they're all preaching out of different versions of the Bible. Yeah, it it says the same stuff. It's worded a little different, phrased a little different. So some of that stuff you can interpret totally different too. You know.
absolutely. So I mean, we can go ahead and jump to with that question. A lot of people take the spiritual authority. You have your pastors, and the Bible gives you a list of all these people. You know, I can't remember them all, but apostles, prophets, teachers. Um, but I guess the ultimate authority in that case is supposed to be the Bible. So, we've all agreed it may be healthy to question authority. What do you think about questioning the Bible?
So let me steal the Dan McClellan line here. Is that nothing has authority. Authority comes from a group of people agreeing on something. So the
I
Bible
agree
in
with that.
itself has no authority, but because a group of people have agreed then it carries authority. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But questioning the Bible, I mean, I think again, there's just a filter you have to run it through. You have to take it for what it is. It's thousands of years old. It was not written to you, no matter how much you want it to be. It is not one book. It's 66 books with different writers, with different audiences. It's not telling one story. 66 different stories, well, with the exception of continuation books, first, second, stuff like that. There's been, I mean, there's been changes made throughout time, so you're away from the original meaning there. I mean, you just have to take all these things into consideration. I'm sure this will be discussed in future episodes, but again, it's just that filter. Um, it was put together. The 66 books were put together by men, and they had criteria that fit their beliefs. So, out of all the Christian writings, if the writing didn't meet their criteria, then it didn't get in. So there you have bias just to begin with. So there's just so many things to consider. I think it can be healthy. There's a lot of wisdom in it, but you have to run it through that filter. It even says the Bible itself even says to question things. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think. I mean, this is what this podcast is all about: is questioning. That's how we got to talk.
It'd
That's
be
how we
weird
came
if
up with
we
this.
answered no.
Was
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's kind of how we got started. Us three, when we started talking about having deep thoughts and stuff like that. That was one of the things, was questioning some things in the Bible. And I mean, other than I mean, a lot of the stories in the Bible are very questionable. And a lot of it, it's very hard to believe.
Can you think
So
of
yeah,
a example of a story that you find questionable?
Anything with talking animals.
yeah. I mean, one example, I guess, would be Jonah in the well.
Yeah.
you know,
That's a
That's a
he
good one.
spent what, 3 days in the well.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah. I
not
mean,
saying I don't know. I mean, it's questionable, and like I'm just going off the obvious stories: Jonah in the well, Daniel in the lion's den. I mean, yeah, that probably could have happened, but I mean, you see all these videos now, people at zoos falling in. I mean, they're automatically getting attacked. uh, uh, I don't know. It's
I
like
get you.
Josh said. It doesn't hold authority. So I think like we said before, I think everything should be questionable.
Yeah. I mean, and I agree. And I think people do it all the time. I think, like I said, that's why there is, uh, you know, 50 different denominations
Yeah,
because there's
Hmm.
50 different interpretations of certain verses. People are questioning this or questioning that. Um, and I think that's healthy. And I think it's healthy to question, even go a step further, like Josh said, and question, um, you know, should the Bible have any authority at all? I mean, you got to think if someone was to walk up to you right now and tell you that God told them to to say something to you, God told them, X, Y, Z. Would you question that?
it would have to
If
be
anyone ever says to me, "God told you," God told me, I don't hear what you say after that.
Right.
I would let them explain themselves, uh, like what God told them to say, and it would have to be very, very spot on for me to believe
Yeah.
God told them.
But yeah, but my point for asking that is it's basically the same thing with the Bible. It's written by people who said God told them this. They wrote it down, um, in different languages. Then it's translated, it's copied, it is put together, like Josh said, in a canon. Guys have a certain criteria they're looking for. So it's people doing all of this, bringing us the Bible, which we then say this is from God. So we have to listen to it. And it's almost like 90% of Christians just completely overlook the fact that there's books that almost didn't make it in the Bible. There's books, there's different variants within translations. There are different manuscripts that have been in conflict. So there's a whole lot of people's thought behind it. I think it's only right to question it. It didn't just fall out of the sky and land on a silver platter for us to then live our lives by.
That's a question I really have been wondering. It's like where do people think the Bible came from?
I think we don't
Like it
think
was
about it. I
just
mean,
one of
everybody
those
knows.
magical.
Yeah, everybody knows people wrote it, but we think it was a lot more um, dictated by God, I guess, than it really seems to be. And I don't think most people know about, some of the books being in question, like
Yeah.
all those later books, like uh, First, Second, Third John, Jude, Revelation. Like a lot of those barely made it in. And then there's other books, the Apocalypse of Peter, um, Shepherd of Hermas. There's a lot of them that almost made it in that some Christians thought should be
Gospel
in.
of Thomas.
Yeah, Gospel of Thomas. There's an Apocrypha in the Catholic Bible. So there's a lot.
Mm.
There's a lot that needs to be questioned. That's worth putting forth the effort. If you're going to dictate your life by a book, it's worth putting it to a test, right? I mean, what would you ask? Like, what would evangelical Christians expect Mormons or Muslims to do? They would expect them to question those beliefs to change their mind. I would say, are you willing to do the same?
That's good.
Um, all right. So in the Bible, if it is an authority, it also establishes authority in other areas of life. There's a verse in Romans 13 tells us to obey the laws of the land, obey the king. Um, like I said, I mentioned Ephesians 4 earlier, the different authorities in the church. That's where you get your pastors and your apostles and prophets and teachers. And then there's also authority in the home in the Bible in multiple passages. That the husband's the head of the household, and then the wife, and then the children. So whenever the Bible mentions these things as authorities, do you see where there could be any problems with that?
Yeah, if we're talking Romans 13, obey the laws of the land and stuff, I can guarantee the majority of Republican Christians are picking and choosing not to do that one right now.
Yep.
Whoever's in office is when they choose to follow that. Yeah, but I think, there can be danger in anything. There can be even good things. There can be too much of it, and can become a bad thing. So the whole man being the head of that household thing, I don't really. I'm not a man's man, I'm not a outdoorsman or whatever, and like I don't rule. I don't. I just don't. I don't really understand that. I've never been that
Well,
type of person. Like,
I think that goes back to back in the old times. The women stayed home, the men worked. They were the breadwinners. This is a totally different time now. Uh,
hmm,
women now are a lot of them are breadwinners in the home and making more than the husbands.
amen.
Because my household is one of them, and I'm okay with that. I put in my fair share at work and work hard, but you know,
You don't see yourself as an authority in your home.
yeah, I do. Well, that's what I was getting to. I think I, I feel like me and her both split it pretty evenly. Uh, I think there's some things that require me to be, you know, the authority of the household. Um, but I don't know. I don't know. I think it's just a different time we're living in too.
Yeah,
Um,
which I think there's a difference in being a decision maker and an authority. Like
right.
I see myself as an authority to my kids, but
Hmm.
there's
Yes. Yes.
no way I see myself as an authority over Chelsea. Like I
I
view
agree
her
with that.
completely as equal,
That
completely as capable. Um,
that's controlling.
I may be the one that has to make a decision, a difficult decision, but sometimes she may be the one that has to make a difficult decision.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think it falls on both of us. I don't think either one of us is an authority over the other. I think that is, I would agree. I think that's outdated. Um, and uh, I think there's
Look
a
at us
lot of
getting woke.
examples. I think there's a lot of examples where that could be dangerous. Um, you see it in like if you've seen that Duggar documentary, you know,
Yeah.
husbands taking their authority to the extreme. Uh, Husbands can be abusive. Are wives supposed to submit to that authority? I don't
According
think
to the
so.
Bible.
Yeah, it
I don't
just
think the
doesn't.
Bible
It doesn't
actually
really
says
make
that,
sense
but
to me.
well, maybe it does.
It doesn't make sense to me that I don't know. I've never viewed someone that's my age. Like I would never view Joanna as like someone to be authoritative over. Like she's just a peer. Like we're in this together. It
Right.
doesn't like it's never even entered my mind. Like we make jokes because you know about we've grown up hearing verses about submit to your husband and stuff like that. I make jokes all the time, but but ultimately I don't have a category for that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. She's walking by your side. Our wives are walking by our side. When we married them, you know, we're doing all this together. Like yeah, you're supposed to be somewhat leading, I guess, you know. Um, I don't know. But like Josh said, you know, I don't know,
Because I
Yeah,
just
and
I think we're better as a team because
right.
yeah,
we complement each other.
absolutely.
Like I've put too much confidence in my quick wittedness, so like I can overlook things, I can miss things because I just I just act, and then she's kind of like thinks things through a lot more than I do, and things like that. Like we work
Yeah,
well together. If it was all
yeah,
up to me to lead, like I would probably make a mess of things. But with
yeah.
her co-leading with me, it works well.
Yeah,
And you can bounce things off of her, and you know, vice versa.
Yeah, we both have drastically different views of the world. We see things very differently. So I can see things from a different perspective, and she can see things from a different perspective. So it helps us make a better, more wise decision.
yeah, I agree. And the thing is, though, the view that I just shared that I have and that y'all are talking about is has changed because when I first got married, year one, man, I was a diehard fundamentalist Christian. I thought I was supposed to be the authority. Like
Yeah,
I, I seriously, we had conversations about, she was supposed to be submissive, and looking back, it makes me cringe because it's so ridiculous. Like, but now, obviously, my eyes have been opened. But I was trying to follow the Bible, and I thought that's what the Bible taught, and I thought that's the way things needed to be in our home. So I was not a very um, it wasn't a very good time to start with.
I think all young fundamentalists make that mistake in their first year of marriage. I was the same way.
Yeah.
I was just trying to
Uh,
be something I'm not. Like Joanna's very
yeah.
confrontational. I'm super go with the flow. It just doesn't work when I was trying to be like the head of the
Well, I
household
think,
guy.
I mean, marriage is such a big step too, and like TJ, when he was, you know, like he said, his first year, he was trying to be very like authoritative. Like, I mean, yeah, I think it's just with it being something new, you don't really know how to, you know, you don't really know what to expect or what to do. So you're just trying to kind of step up, I guess, you know. So yeah, I can see how I think everybody in a way has been like that.
Yeah. I think that is a problem with, young Christian couples when they're dating, everything is all, it's all fun and it's all lovey-dovey, and then they don't and this I'm speaking in our case obviously, but a lot of times these young girls don't realize the the Bible teachings that these guys got in their head. So when they get married, all of a sudden they wonder what happened. But now the husband thinks, "Oh, I'm in charge now." So that can be a rude awakening for the wives whenever they get into a marriage with a young
Mm-hmm.
fundamentalist Christian guy who it seems like he's changed because dating was not like that. But now that you're married, he feels like he's having to take on this responsibility, and again, I just think it can be dangerous. It can be, especially, you can go to extremes of like abuse and verbal abuse, and uh, it can not be a good time. I mean, I've seen it work with some wives who just kind of roll over, but obviously Chelsea's not like that. So,
I've seen some guys roll over too and let the women
yeah,
take
I've seen
control.
that too. Boy, they're not living by the Bible. Um, so what about, okay, so that's the home. What about other areas? What about like the government? Josh mentioned a lot of Republicans, or it depends on who's in office. But I think about the Revolutionary War. Like you've got the king giving commands, giving orders, and here we are. We celebrated every 4th of July the fact that we rebelled against the king. Do you think that something like that is against the Bible? Because the Bible says, obey the king. That the king is put there by God. Yeah, I don't know. You might pull up Romans 13 and 1 and see what it says, Josh. But
Let me pull it up here. Please pause.
I mean, if you're going off the Bible, then yeah, I would say it's.
Do I need to look up the KJV version for our hardcore fundies out there?
do
It
it.
says, Romans 13:1, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. Which is so ironic,
Ooh,
considering that Christianity comes from opposing the Roman Empire.
that's true too. Yeah, that is interesting. So there's no
Like,
powers
how
but those
could
that are ordained of God, and here we are saying we live in a Christian nation based off of a country that rebelled and resisted the power that was
power?
ordained by God. So
Do
I
you
don't
still feel like this is a Christian nation
I don't think it was
in
ever
today?
intended to be a Christian nation, but that's a whole conversation for another time.
Yeah, I don't think it should be based off religion.
No. But I guess the point being, I mean, we're a nation of Christians and we celebrate this nation and we're celebrating the breaking of, or the questioning at least, the authority of the Word of God, which says to obey the king, obey the power. So I don't know. I find that interesting. And I think, and if you go down another level, talking about spiritual authorities, we're Protestants. So
Protesting.
our whole basis is, you know, Martin Luther challenging the spiritual authorities. So, I mean, there's everything, I feel like it almost seems like only good comes out of questioning and challenging authority. And that, again, not to say that it always has to end up in bloodshed and revolutionary war, but I think we should always be, you know, running it through
We're
that
about to
filter,
take
like
this
he said.
podcast to the streets.
I mean, I kind of like put pastors and the government in the same category, kind of, because like you had the left and the right wing pushing, their narratives and trying to push everything on you to believe or think the way that they are. Uh, Pastors are kind of the same, where they get up and speak to you, teach you, and kind of direct you in a way of their thinking. You know,
All right, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've always really struggled with. And I tried to do a good job of whenever I would preach or teach and I think this would go with spiritual authority as well. If you're giving someone advice, like, don't be so matter of fact, because you could be wrong. Like, there are so many options. Lay those options out. Let the other person filter that, process that, and make their own decision. Like, I
don't be
think
so
it would go,
biased.
yeah, because bias produces bias. So this pastor coming up was taught by someone, so he was taught their biases. So then he gets to the pulpit, teaches his biases to his people. So then they produce those. Like, you have to. But if you got up there, said, "Hey, this is this doctrine. Like, we believe in free will. We believe that you decide to follow Jesus, but there's this option out here where God ordained salvation. Everyone was predestined, and then there's another option where love wins in the end, and everyone's going to get to heaven." I mean, obviously, you would do it in a more articulate way than that, but I mean, there's a way to present the options. Like, I would. I preached, and I think people don't like people think like they're just part of they just defend their team blindly. Like I preached when I was on staff at a Pentecostal church. I became a Calvinist and I preached hardcore Calvinist doctrine in a Pentecostal church, and no one was any the wiser because I was at a Pentecostal church. But if someone would have labeled it Calvinistic, then they would have all been up in arms about it
Right.
because
And
they just blindly defend their team.
yeah, but here's the thing about what you just said. I don't think people like that. People want to be told what to believe. They don't like you
Mm,
laying options out there and giving them a choice, leaving it open. For some reason, people want to be told. I mean, that's the whole thing with confirmation bias. Like, I'm going to watch Fox News because they're going to tell me what's right, or I'm going to watch CNN because they're going to, people want to be told what to think. Because
Yeah,
thinking
I
for
agree.
yourself is difficult. Thinking for yourself is hard. Reading the Bible is not always fun. I mean, you know, different. Some people, like Joe Allen, he hates reading. He's not going to get into it. I like reading, but I don't, still, I don't want to read through numbers. I mean, it's not fun. So it's easier to open up like one of those little devotion books that just give you a scripture and then tell you what it means, or sit under a preacher who's going to tell you what to think, tell you what to believe, tell you how to vote, tell you this, tell you that. And a lot of people just prefer to live their lives like that, never having to think. And even because once I became a youth pastor and I realized I was up there telling these kids what to believe, that was hard for me because at the time I was questioning things myself. So I would try to be kind of more open-ended like that. And some of the parents didn't like, they wanted me, preach hellfire, preach on tithing, don't leave these things open for these kids to think about. So I
yeah,
think
I got called into
people
the
struggle with
office a
that.
lot.
Did you? For
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, like I would just say things like kids would be like using the laws in Leviticus saying you can't get tattoos, and I would just say like explain why you can't use that law, and get called in like, why are you telling the kids it's okay to get tattoos?
Because your
Oh, yeah.
body is a temple.
Yeah, I mean I get in trouble with stuff like that, but what you were just saying though is that's why I'm not in ministry anymore, is
Same.
because
That was the
I
whole
don't
reason I
want to tell
quit.
people how to believe. I do not want that influence. And even talking to people, they're like, I mean, the fact that you don't want it is why you should be in that position. Like, that makes no sense. I don't want it. So I'm not gonna I don't people take what you say and run with it just because you have a microphone and you're on a platform, and that is terrifying to me. I'm
Yeah.
like, you're gonna base your life off what I said? I'm an idiot, man. I'm just up here. No, no, not a good idea.
Okay, so with that statement, do you think authority is necessary at all? Do you think we should have people in positions of authority? Because, like you said, you found it terrifying. You know, you thought it was ridiculous. Do you think anybody should be in those kind of positions?
That's a good question. And I don't really know if I have an answer, to be honest. I think that, I mean, I think authority is so open ended. Like, I think there needs to be guidelines for like how we act. Like, we can't just all just be like doing whatever we want in life, because like there's obviously terrible people out there that are going to do terrible things. So I think there has to be, some type of boundaries, some type of guidelines, some type of framework for that. And I mean, I don't know. I'm going to talk myself into a corner just talking out loud because I don't know how to navigate through that. I haven't thought through it enough.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I don't know. I mean, as far as like everyday work life, I feel like there should be. Um, I just feel like a lot of these newer generations, there's not much work ethic. I think I feel like there needs to be some type of authority there. Um, I guess to kind of, I mean, you don't want to micromanage, but just kind of like make sure
I
everything's
get,
running smooth.
yeah, I get what you're saying, and I don't like the word authority. I don't know. I feel like
Yeah.
I guess I'm a red-blooded American. You know, I don't want anybody telling me how to run my
Right.
life.
Yeah.
I don't like the word authority, but
Yeah,
I do think leadership is
Yep.
necessary. I think there has to be
that's what I was
leaders.
trying to get at. Yeah,
Yeah, there has to be leaders in positions, and it is necessary. But at the same time, I respect a leader more who is honest and will say, uh, "Look, I could be wrong." Like, example, I sat down um, with my principal the other day. He had made a decision. I wasn't too sure about it. I sat down with him. We had a conversation, and he said, "Look, if I'm wrong, I'll step back and punt," is what he told me. And I respected that. I thought that was very big of him, and it made me look up to him more as someone in a leadership position. But as far as like someone telling me I can or can't do things with my own life, I've been quickly, you know, whoa, who are you? You know, what makes you think you can tell me that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I like you said, like your principal, um, giving you a little bit of leeway or admitting, like he said, he would admit if he's wrong or whatever. I like that much more than just someone who's just like, you do it my way or no way, you know?
Right. And I do
Yeah.
get that I understand that in some instances, like with kids and stuff, like as a basketball coach, I think, I think it's valuable. And even a basketball coach is kind of like a trivial example, but like a military general or a leader with such a lot, so much on the line like that. I mean, you can't have infantry guys running around questioning their
yeah,
their generals because of the information that they may not know. Like when you're in something as detrimental as war, I think there has to be authority. Um, but I don't think we're in it. And we could have a whole conversation about is everyday life a war between good and evil or whatever. I think some people view it like that, so they view pastors and stuff as like generals. But I think that's an unhealthy way to view life.
what a
I
miserable
used
way
to,
to live.
it is. I used to think like that, and it's not fun. I
Yeah,
mean,
me
it
too.
takes it takes a lot of joy out of life. Um,
Because the
so
devil's always out to get you. You always have to
the
be on your
devil's
guard.
always after you. Trying, we can't make it to church on Sunday because the devil's trying to get us. I made a joke. The Chelsea the other day. We like to go to Sam's a lot on Sunday mornings, and we were having trouble getting the boys out of the house. And I was like, the devil just don't want us to go to Sam's this morning. He's fighting us.
Yeah. I make jokes to Lane about that all the time.
uh, so, um, all right. So thinking about that, we talked about leadership being necessary. What do you think are some qualifications? What would you think is a signs of a good leader?
Respected, the husband to one wife.
You need me to read the list,
My
the verse.
little Bible joke there for you. I mean, I think so. This is one thing that I've learned that I've never thought I was a good leader. I thought you were born with leadership and it was something you had or you didn't. But leadership is a skill that you can learn. And I think that I think the main thing, that was probably loud. I knocked my microphone over. I think the main quality would just be humility. If you have humility, integrity, like you're not always right. You're the same person when you're by yourself than you are when you're with a group of people. Like I think with those two things, I mean, you can learn anything else.
Yeah.
And that's how you build trust. That's how you build followers. That's how you know, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
I think experience is pretty important. I think it's funny whenever these young Mormon guys who are like 17, 18 come to the door and tell me they're gonna, you know, teach me how to live life. You know what I mean? Like you got a long road ahead of you, buddy. You got, so I think
You get
experience, I'm
parenting
not
advice
gonna,
from people with no kids.
I understand that, young people, there are young people who are exceptional and have a lot of knowledge, a lot of understanding and wisdom. But I'm not going to sit under some, 20-year-old pastor telling me how to live life.
Last time I had some Mormons come up to me, we put them to work, and they never came back.
Put them to work.
I think I told Josh that story. I think, didn't
Yeah.
I? Yeah.
Like around the
They
house
came.
or what?
They So I was helping when Joe Lewis and his wife moved up here. I was at their apartment, and had just started unloading the whole U-Haul truck, and they came up, and Joe put them. We put them right to work. They're on the third floor, and we had to carry their couches, everything up, and they were
Nice.
sweating. And they left right after that and never came back.
I like it. So, but yeah, like you said, and then experience, I think that's kind of important. Uh,
Hmm.
so what do you think would be signs of a bad leader? Someone who's a bad authority.
I'd say someone who is, pushing their beliefs. If you're talking about pastors,
My way or the
pushing,
highway.
yeah, their way or no way.
Yeah, someone who
Yeah.
gets defensive when you
Mm-hmm.
question their decision. I think is a sign that, hey, I
And
probably
blocks you on Facebook.
sign that I think someone who gets defensive, it may be a sign that you might not want to follow their decisions.
Yeah, pretty much. I guess I would just the opposite of everything we said. So self-centered would be
So
the opposite
yeah,
of humility.
that's a good point.
Two-faced. Just anybody who leaves. So I would also throw in someone that's never been a follower. Like if you don't know how to follow, probably shouldn't lead.
Hmm.
I guess that
Yeah.
would be the
That's good.
experience aspect. Because you do need to be aware of the responsibility that comes with and the influence that comes with leadership.
Yeah, I
Because otherwise,
agree.
you just have people doing things and they just leave a wake of destruction in their path because they don't understand that. People are going to take what I say and run with it.
Right. I just think you got to be able to admit that you could be wrong.
Mm.
Right? You can't, like these guys that just want to dig their feet in the sand or draw a line in the sand and say, this is the truth and you're never going to tell me otherwise. I just think that's not it. I mean, that's dishonest. You need to admit that there's a possibility that you're wrong. And I think that's across the board. It could be on any subject. You could be
All
wrong.
right, let me play devil's advocate. What
Okay.
would you say to someone who's, what if we're wrong about this podcast?
I mean, it had to be a specific
Well,
wrong
I
about
don't.
What
what?
if we're wrong and
I don't think we're not really trying to push, you know, everything on these people that are listeners, you know. I
No,
mean, we're not,
absolutely not.
yeah. So I think that's a little different.
I think it's the opposite.
Thousands. I mean, we have a platform of thousands and thousands of people.
Speak it into existence.
I mean, I've been told recently, like, you can't go against the Bible, you know, or
You got to. I mean, okay. So the
Everyone
Bible
does.
tells, the Bible tells slaves to obey their masters. I think this is in First or Second Peter. It's in one of the Peters. Um, but it tells slaves to obey their masters, even the cruel ones. Like, that's terrible advice. Like, as
Yeah.
Americans, we know that's terrible advice, especially
how has the
Americans.
Bible not been canceled yet?
I remember driving through Dothan. I mean, it's probably been a year ago, but it's not too long ago. And a church had on their sign, "Slaves, obey your masters." And I know they were intending that to be like, a different meaning, like spiritual meaning, but it didn't look good.
Good Lord.
It did not look good.
How did that
Um,
church not get burnt down?
they changed the sign pretty quick, I think. But I think you got to
Hmm.
question. You got to question advice even from the Bible. There's a lot of bad advice in there, uh,
Yeah.
and that's one of them there. Um,
That's a good
you
example.
There doesn't. There just doesn't have to be a cutter way to live life. Like the Bible works great for people. Like it brings a framework to the life. Like people coming out of addiction or whatever. Like it gives them purpose. Like that's great. That's a beautiful thing. Like no one is arguing. And if I give off that I don't mean to give off that idea that I think Christianity is wrong because I really enjoy a lot of aspects of Christianity still. But my problem with Christianity is if you step outside, I mean, not even step outside, but if you step out of line, then people lose their minds and they don't know how to process that. Like, it's okay
right.
to question things, it's okay to live your life the way that you see fit based off your life experience.
Yeah. And then, but one thing I think is funny, the churches I've seen pastors or I've seen articles, churches that encourage people to ask questions. It's always like layered with that. As long as you come back to the right answers, like they say, I've seen that, like where they're like, doubt's okay as long as it helps you grow in your faith. Like not if you change
Yeah.
your mind on anything. So it's kind of funny. Um, but talking about bad authority figures and stuff, I think that's the best way to avoid getting yourself in a situation where you're being taken advantage of by a bad authority, being manipulated. People like to use verses like "lean not on your understanding." We've talked about that. We've mentioned that in one other podcast. But if I'm not leaning on my understanding, whose understanding am I leaning on? Right? That basically, when an authority tells you that, they're saying, "Don't lean on your understanding, lean on mine." Um, so, how do you think is best to avoid being manipulated?
Yeah, again, I just think it's having that filter. I mean, the majority of people have common sense. Like when you hear something, it doesn't register. You're just like there's something off here.
Yeah, and don't
I
just
mean, because
agree because everybody else seems to.
yeah, like you pull from your life experience. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I mean, and with the pastors that say that too, I mean, they're putting a lot on themselves by saying that because then they'll be held accountable for everyone that hears them speaking, basically. Am I right or wrong?
That's what that verse says that we read earlier.
Yeah.
Are you saying like by God or what are you saying?
Well, whenever uh, I can't remember which one of y'all had just said. Might have been Josh. I, it was about them, preaching.
Yeah, I mean, well, you think about like cult leaders. There's a lot of great documentaries on cults. It's amazing how these guys can take advantage of people, and then
Mhm.
and we do look at them as being accountable for those people. But to me, it always just blows my mind how like none of those people thought, "Hey, this probably isn't a good idea." These seem like some weird ideas. And I think if you don't have that filter or that those critical thinking skills, you're going to run into the potential of being taken advantage of at the least and being manipulated, on the more extreme side of things to do crazy things that you never thought you would do to begin with.
Yeah, I guess more of the story is don't take everything as face value with the pastors. Do your
Yeah,
research.
With
don't don't
anyone.
be
Yeah.
don't be afraid to question authority. And like we said, you don't have to be disrespectful, but be honest. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't know something, don't pretend like you do, and uh, and then be honest about if you have questions. If you disagree with something, don't agree that the emperor has nice clothes just because everybody else is when you can clearly see he's naked.
Yeah,
Final
I agree.
thoughts? That it?
Final thoughts, I would just say, we'll just repeat it again. I mean, critical thinking skills are very important. Process everything through that filter. If you're in a position of authority, I would just say to be mindful of that, understand your influence. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to not have all the answers, because if you're wrong, all of your followers are going to follow you right into wherever you're leading them that's wrong. Just be mindful of that. And
Yeah,
if you want to question, be respectful.
yeah, and if for the pastors too, what you're preaching up on the pulpit, you need to be living outside of church too, because there's been a lot of them that they'll preach one thing up there, then you know you start hanging around them, and I mean they're just they're thinking like you. So
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, I'd say don't pretend. Don't
yeah,
pretend to know things you don't know. Don't pretend to be someone you're not. And don't be afraid to change your mind if you find out you're wrong. That scares a lot of people, I think. They think, I just, I don't want to question because I don't want to find out I'm wrong. Why?
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to change your mind. I know it's
Change.
it's scary, but don't you care about the truth? Don't you care about, you know, being honest, being open? I think that's important and valuable. So
yeah, I do too.
that's it for me.
Thanks again for listening. Uh, let's keep the conversation going. Be sure to follow us on all social medias at Holy Shift Pod. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Until next time.
That's it.